What's going on YouTube? It's your boy RonnyPugs back again with another Spider-Man PS4 video for you guys. And today we're going to be taking it back to the 2000s because today we will be touring through Insomniac's New York, visiting each Raimi landmark that's in the game that I thought was unique enough for this video, that stood out the most within the films, and also just the ones that I can remember off the top of my head. So with that, let's begin the tour. Welcome to RonnyPugs' RAIMI Trilogy Landmark Tour through Insomniac's New York. I hope you guys enjoy. So the first stop on our list is the first key location we see within Raimi's Spider-Man series, Columbia University, or as the game likes to call Morningside University, which can be seen throughout all three films. Now aside from Columbia serving as Peter's school in the second and third film, this school played a bigger role within the first film, where a high school senior named Peter Parker was bitten by a genetically enhanced super spider, granting him the ability to do whatever a spider can. And this is definitely one of my favorite landmarks within the Raimi trilogy. I went to New York about 2 summers ago, and the hotel I stayed at was within walking distance of the school, so within the Raimi films and real life, this was the first key location to New York that I got to experience. Moving on from the location that's responsible for creating the spider in Spider-Man, our next stop is the New York Public Library, which is responsible for Peter becoming the man he become the rest of his life, Spider-Man. This library was where Uncle Ben dropped Peter off right after delivering the famous "with great power" speech in Spider-Man 1, and we've only seen this location in Spider-Man 1, but it is mentioned in Spider-Man 2 when Peter finally admits to Aunt May that he's responsible for Uncle Ben being killed, since this was used as the cover-up for what Peter was really going to do, which is try to win money for a car. Personally, I'd say this is a more forgettable landmark from the Raimi trilogy, but nonetheless, it still plays an important role in being the setting for one of the most iconic Spider-Man scenes. Not too far from the New York Public Library is the Flatiron Building, better known as the Daily Bugle within the Raimi universe. This can be seen in all three films, serving as the place of business for Peter Parker during the trilogy, selling his photos of Spider-Man to J. Jonah Jameson. This location also introduced us to some of the most memorable side characters of the trilogy, such as Jameson, Robbie Robertson, Betty Brant, and Hoffman, who's played by Sam Raimi's brother Ted. And of all locations in this video, this is the one I most associate with the Raimi trilogy. This building is so iconic, and it goes with Spider-Man the same way the Empire State Building goes with King Kong. Our next stop of the Raimi Trilogy Landmarks tour within Insomniac's New York is the Osborn Mansion, which can be seen throughout all three films. And unlike the previously mentioned landmarks in this video, there is no landmark token for this location. However, there is a backpack containing a piece of Rhino's suit on top of the mansion. And aside from this being the house of Norman and Harry Osborn, this location also served as the hideout for the Green Goblin, with Harry discovering that secret at the end of Spider-Man 2. And this building also gave us the second fight scene between Harry and Peter in Spider-Man 3. I am glad that this landmark made its way in the Spider-Man PS4 because I don't remember it being in many other Spider-Man games. However, in the PS3 360 PC version of Spider-Man 3, we are able to explore this building's interior. And speaking of Harry Osborn, our next stop on the tour takes us to the Bow Bridge located in Central Park, where Harry sabotaged Peter and Mary Jane's relationship in Spider-Man 3. Personally, I believe the scene in which we see this bridge could have been done a lot better. I would have preferred Mary Jane tell Peter that Harry threatened her and we could have had a fight in Central Park, or maybe Peter ends up confronting Harry later in the film like we got, because although the Goblin formula enhanced Harry's strength and agility, I highly doubt that he would have been able to hear what Peter and Mary Jane were talking about on the bridge. I believe the scene could have been done a lot better. But this is one of the landmarks I wasn't expecting to see in game. I have to say Insomniac Central Park is the best of any Spider-Man game, and I'm looking forward to what we could see in the sequel. Now, another location that's been seen in multiple Spider-Man films, but only the first and third film in the Raimiverse, is Times Square, New York's greatest tourist attraction. This can be seen in Spider-Man 1 as it hosts a World Unity Fair that gave us our first fight between hero and villain in the series, and this can also be seen at the beginning of Spider-Man 3 where Tobey is watching Spider-Man highlights on one of the video boards, and later on in the film where Stan Lee delivers arguably his best cameo. There isn't too much to talk about with this location since it's an area that most people know about in New York. However, the PS2 Wii version of Spider-Man 3 does not feature Times Square in the game. Close to Times Square is our next location in-game, which is the Rockefeller Center rooftop garden seen in Spider-Man 1 right after the Unity Fair fight. This is the location where Spider-Man dropped off Mary Jane after rescuing her from the Green Goblin in the first film, and although we only see this location for a short time, Spider-Man does display some wittiness during the scene that a lot of people seem to think that he lacks throughout the films. And also it's a blink and you miss it moment, but they actually still have Spider-Man's scrapped web shooters attached to his costume during the scene. Go back and watch it if you guys don't believe me. I wasn't expecting to see this landmark in game, and let me know if it's been in any other Spider-Man games because I can't remember if it is or not. And speaking of Mary Jane being rescued, our next stop is the Queensboro Bridge, which served as the setting for the final fight of Spider-Man 1. This can be seen during the first half of that fight where Spider-Man not only rescues Mary Jane but rescues a gondola of kids with the help of some New Yorkers. And using this bridge within film is an interesting choice considering the comic this scene was based off of has some debate to whether the story takes place on the Brooklyn or George Washington Bridge, but it does make sense for the film to use this bridge as a setting considering Aunt May was in a Queens hospital right before this battle, so the Goblin would obviously want to use the closest bridge as a location. Now, I'm gonna end the video with 3 locations that are inaccurate to the Raimi trilogy in terms of actual location, but they are references to the franchise nonetheless, with our first stop being the game's Harlem Cemetery where Uncle Ben's grave is located, which is a direct reference to the Raimi films. The gravestone in game is the same one that was featured in Spider-Man 1 and 2, with there only being minor difference on the tombstone, and when this game first came out, there were some Raimi haters out there that was saying that this was a reach, but there's no denying that this is the same tombstone that's seen in film, even down to the same shape. Our second to last stop in this Raimi tour in Spider-Man PS4 is a location that isn't seen in the films, but it is a reference to the franchise nonetheless, which is any pizza parlor in the game. And the reason why these locations are important is because getting close enough to the pizza shops will trigger music from inside the pizza parlor, which is the same music that can be heard during the Spider-Man 2 video game pizza missions. And while it isn't the exact song from the game, it is a cover of that song, and I'm surprised others were able to discover this Easter egg since it's such a subtle thing that Insomniac added to the game. And our last stop on the Raimi tour takes us to the Freedom Tower, which wasn't even around when the Raimi trilogy was out, however it is the site where the original Twin Towers stood. And the reason I go to this location is not only because we can briefly see the Twin Towers featured in Spider-Man 1 for a quick second, but the original towers were featured on a teaser poster for Spider-Man 1, which is arguably my favorite Spider-Man poster design ever, but more importantly, one of the first ever teasers for Spider-Man 1 featured these 2 towers as a backdrop in the film, where there were some bank robbers that were getting away in a helicopter and Spider-Man ends up webbing them up between the 2 towers. It was obviously pulled from theaters due to the tragic events of 9/11, but it's still over on YouTube in case you guys want to watch it. So with that, I'm gonna end the video there. I tried to tour us through the key locations from the trilogy that I remember the most. I know we see a shot of Peter on top of the Chrysler Building right after the death of Uncle Ben, but I didn't include that in this video just because it's a very short moment from the franchise and definitely not the highlight of that sequence of events. And if there's any that I missed in this video, let me know in the comments down below. Again, I tried to cover everything that I could remember from the trilogy, and maybe we'll see a part 2 of this video if there's enough to cover for another video. And as always, thanks for watching, be sure to subscribe, follow my social medias, and I will see you guys again in my next video.